if you've heard of Sean Baker and how I first heard of him, other than I think I first really heard of him with Tangerine, and I had heard, oh, he was part of Greg the Bunny, and I remembered Greg the Bunny when it was on Fox, and then later on IFC. You've probably heard of Sean Baker being involved in Greg the Bunny. When I first heard of him with Tangerine, I understood that was his other credit. I never really looked into it. I feel like I listened to a podcast with him about that, but I guess I forgot the whole deal. So basically, he created Greg the Bunny with his two friends, Spencer Chenoy and Dan Milano. It seems like they were a little more involved in it, and Sean Baker, and all three of them made it for the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, which is a Manhattan public access thing. It's only available in Manhattan. If you didn't know how the public access thing in New York works, it's basically you have the Manhattan one, a Queens one, a Brooklyn one. I believe there's a Bronx one and a Staten. Each borough has its own public access. Why we did that, I have no clue, but that's what we did for, I don't know why we did that, but that's what we did. This was on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and it was on a public access show called Junk Tape, and ended up having a pretty long, successful life. Greg the Money was first a public access show, then introed things on IFC, then became a Fox show, which didn't last very long. And Sean Baker isn't really credited very much in, which I'll get to why. Then on IFC, and then Warren the Ape had his own spin-off in the 2010s on MTV and MTV2. I'm not going to talk about Warren the Ape, but when Sean Baker makes another movie, I will talk about Warren the Ape. I figure let's just talk about two versions of Greg the Bunny. Now, Greg the Bunny did the IFC original thing, but when it started the Fox show in 2002, he is not credited as a creator. It's actually his two friends, Spencer Chenoy and Dan Milano, and then Stephen Levitan, who's mostly known for things like Just Shoot Me and Modern Family. That kind of surprised me because I thought Sean Baker was the creator of Greg the Bunny, and I was super confused, like, what's going on? So at the very end of the credits of the Fox show, it credits Sean Baker with creating like the characters and stuff like that. But supposedly, according to him, he was having various drug issues at the time, and he wasn't really reliable. So his friends sort of like distanced themselves, made the Fox show. He regained their trust of the other creators and was involved in the IFC show, but he got checks because of the Fox show because they're based on things he created, but he wasn't that involved, and you can really tell. But if you're wondering about it, he got sober, and he used sort of his Greg the Bunny money to go back to NYU and learn more about film and meet up with the guy who made his first film. And so it actually did end up being a major part of how he became the director he was, because he had this franchise to go back to and not have to get a 9 to 5. He didn't make a ton of money, but he made enough to not have to not do filmmaking full time. And that's kind of what helped him develop into who he was, so, which actually sounds amazing for him. But he isn't involved in the Fox show at all. Like, he gets a credit, literally, it's like the last credit in the Fox show, to be clear. Now, the first episode of the Fox show, which I'm going to talk about, was Welcome to Sweet Knuckle Junction. It's kind of it very much feels like Fox trying to make a cult show, which was more of a Fox thing at the time, and them bringing in a well-seasoned sitcom writer to do that. And I'm not just saying that because I know who Stephen Levitan is. I'm saying it because it very much feels like it. Greg the Bunny is leaving with his friends, played by Seth Green, and they don't really want to get jobs. But Greg the Bunny basically is helped out by Seth Green because his dad is played by Eugene Levy, runs this cable kid show and called Sweet Knuckle Junction, and Greg the Bunny thinks he's coming to be an assistant, but because they're getting rid of one of the characters called Rochester because he's not really good anymore and stuff, he accidentally walks into an audition. Greg the Bunny becomes the star of Sweet Knuckle Junction, which is sort of like the plot of the Fox sitcom, is he becomes part of like this Sesame Street type thing, but isn't Sesame Street. It's fine. I liked it more at the time. I don't think it holds up as well because it's so sort of written. I only saw the first one. I just saw random ones when I watched it originally. Although I do remember when it came out, they very much sold like this David Spade cameo, and David Spade is barely in it. I don't, you know, Sarah Silverman's in it a lot actually, and other people, and, you know, Eugene Levy and Seth Green. But I remember them really selling that David Spade was in it when it's like, not, he's really not in it very much. And Jeff Ross is in it, but I don't think he was being sold on that. I generally, it was fun rewatching it, but I think of cult shows at the time, it sort of plays like them trying to play both sides and like hope like they could contain its weirdness, which I don't think ever really works for a cult show. I did think it was fun at the time because it's like Seth Green was cool, you know, for me at the time, not as much now, but it really doesn't, it felt cooler then, and maybe because it was just like on Fox and what a network represented. Now it, like, I don't think it plays as well. It didn't make me want to watch any more of them. It felt like kind of a dumb idea. Like, it's like, you know, I like the idea of like, well, what if puppets are real? Like, it's sort of like the Happy Town Murders, but like maybe better executed, to be honest. But I don't know. It's also like Greg the Bunny, like they have these very elaborate puppets, and Greg the Bunny's like a hand puppet, which is something maybe they get into more in other episodes. But it did feel like sort of like a weird mixture, but not maybe cool enough weird mixture. Now, and I will say Seth Green was super cool about this show. I remember him promoting it a lot, especially when he did Robot Chicken. And one of the guys, I think it's Dan Milano, yes, he went on to work on Robot Chicken. And I've always heard he really liked doing Greg the Bunny, and he was super cool about it. The one thing, like, I will say that people forget about Seth Green. I know he's in, like, Family Guy and Robot Chicken. Robot Chicken's this institution now. When Robot Chicken started, like, he was the guy who did Family Guy and then a bunch of cult shows. Like, he didn't have, like, a real home of his own. Like, he did Buffy for a little bit. He did, I feel like he was in that 70s show at some point. Like, he was just in a bunch of stuff. And he would do cooler stuff and, you know. Oh, I didn't know Dan Milano co-created Glitch Sex. Thank you, Ryan. Then, the other one I talked about, you know, I post a link and I'm talking about tonight, is Greg the Bunny's 6th episode on IFC called Dead Puppet Storage, which is a Pulp Fiction parody. If I have to explain to you the joke of Dead Puppet Storage, you need to watch Pulp Fiction again, and I'm not saying the words that it is parodying on this stream, but you can figure it out. And don't type it in the chat either. The interesting thing about this is very more shot like a Sean Baker thing. He helped write this one. He was much more creatively involved. Not every one of the IFC things he was creatively involved as much. It feels like they sort of, I don't know, you know, he was much more involved in the War on the Ape thing. Like every episode seems like he wrote. This one, not as much. But it's about them making a Pulp Fiction parody. And then them being like, we're making a Pulp Fiction parody in 2005. Like they're criticizing IFC. They're criticizing this. I think they shot in the Kellogg's Diner in Williamsburg, which is interesting. And they debate on like who should play the Gimp, who should play this part, and it's like kind of a funny behind the scenes puppet thing. It's not hilarious. I remember it being funnier at the time. I do like that it's like not just them doing a parody, which I guess they did do and stuff, but them talking about making a parody. I think you could have had a little more fun with the concept, to be honest with you. And like, you know, what it represents for independent film and like what's it like, you know, trying to deal with indie film and stuff like that. It said they make a lot of like, I don't know, they make a lot of like just, you know, basically, oh, this puppet has sex, this one's saying the F word, this one's hanging out too long. Like, just like not that creative. I am surprised the show kept getting chances. And, you know, it literally goes from public, like several different networks. It's almost like Mystery Science Theater, in the sense that like started in public access, went to one network, then another network, then this, then, you know, but this one, each version is different, which I actually do respect that about Greg the Bunny. They didn't just like go, this is what Greg the Bunny is, we're gonna stay with this. They messed around with it. Is Sean Baker involved in things? Yes and no. It doesn't feel like it's 100% his creation. And I tried to do ones that I felt like the first one of the Fox one I should talk about, and I wanted to talk about an IFC one from him. I didn't think it was that hilarious, but it's interesting to see where he came from, which is this rough, interesting, odd public access show that got way bigger than you'd ever think it would. and, get picked up by so many different networks. And all this stuff is a crazy origin story. And I sort of love that, like, he came from this weird cult show and used it to make films. Like, even I saw an interview with him at, I think it's Comic-Con 2006, and him talking about, my film that's played in festivals is getting distribution, and, like, I'm trying to make other films that are very different. And, like, it's cool that he got to use that. It's also cool that he was able to battle his demons and his addiction issues from the first iteration. Like, it feels like he blew his big shot, and he was able to come back and use that to become, a filmmaker and make him the filmmaker he is today. So maybe Greg the Bunny, he is not the most creatively involved. It does not feel like you're watching a Sean Baker movie with puppets, to be clear. But I'm probably personally more of a Syphil and Ollie fan. I do think it's a really unique, interesting show, and I do respect that they changed it every time. And I'm glad that he was able to come back with it and go to film school and use that success to build him into what he is today. I think is really cool. And, I'm kind of glad to have revisited it. I don't know if I want to see that much more, and maybe I'll give it another shot when he has another movie. But it's interesting to think of his history with Greg the Bunny and the two different versions of it that I guess are sort of the bigger two or something. But it's cool that someone went from Greg the Bunny to being the person who won the most Oscars in a single night for one movie.